Affordable housing continues to be a demand here in the City of Charleston. Today, I talk one-on-one with Geona Shaw Johnson of the City of Charleston's Housing and Community Development for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Geona Shaw Johnson, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin.
It's so great to see you. I know that you obviously are the Director of Housing and Community Development for the City of Charleston.
That's correct.
What's new, what's now with your department?
What's new with our department? Wow, what a loaded question, Quintin. We have literally been focusing on what are our main objectives. And our main objectives are to, one, help preserve housing. And so we continue to provide rehab, what we call rehabilitation programs, which are programs where individuals who own their homes can access opportunities to repair their roofs, to facilitate what we call substantial rehabilitation, where all of the major functions in their home are repaired, or we call it sub or mid-substantial, where individuals can then have those services completed in their homes. And I would remind us that when we help facilitate those programs, it is for persons who make certain incomes within our community. They are not offered to everyone. They are funded by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and so they are for persons who make certain income ranges within our community.
And Ms. Geona, let me ask you, how many of those people have you all helped this year?
Let me mess up, Quintin. So traditionally, we help and I'll start with our roof replacement program. We help from 30 to 40 persons a year, just in our office. We also work with nonprofits in the community, like Charleston Habitat for Humanity and Operation Home, and they usually do from 6 to 10 houses per year funded by our office. Again, because the need for rehab is so large, we use other partners who conduct rehab to help us meet the need.
And I'm sitting right here on the peninsula, but where exactly is that need in the City of Charleston per se?
West Ashley, Peninsula, and I would say, Quintin, sometimes the need is so severe that we can't help individuals. If we find that the house is too costly to repair, we will make recommendations for that family, but we won't touch the house. Now, if we can do a roof replacement that keeps the house from getting moisture inside of it, we will do that to help mitigate the challenge. But if it's too severe and the house can't even tolerate a roof repair, we will say to that client, we can't do anything for you. Yeah. And that's unfortunate. That's a difficult thing to have to say to a resident. But the reality is, if your home needs $600,000 worth of repair, a $17,000 roof replacement is really not going to meet that need. And so that is, I guess you could say, one of the realities of the work that we do.
And Ms. Geona, let me drill down on that a little bit. How many of those people have you actually had to give those recommendations to this year?
I think it's been maybe 2.
Okay.
So far.
Yeah.
And I would just say, because these programs are funded by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, we are on a program year. So we go from June to May. Okay. But I know just in my interactions and meeting with staff, literally, we just had one a few days ago. We've been working with that client probably for 30, 45 days, trying to figure out ways to ensure we could help facilitate it. And we could do a roof replacement, if you will, for that client, but that would be the extent at this point that we could do for that client. And so there have been 1 or 2 already this year where we have literally said those words to. Sometimes what we're attempting to do is find other partners i.e., that can help with facilitating the work, meaning bringing some funding to the table. And so that's really helpful. Like Historic Charleston Foundation now has the Common Cause Loan Fund. The Charleston Redevelopment Corporation also has funding to help individuals who have historic houses to repair the outside of those houses. And then what that partnership means is the city can then bring in its federal dollars to maybe address some of the challenges inside of the house. So when we address it that way, with a couple of different funding sources, oftentimes it's more helpful to that client, to that resident.
And when you do partner, that is, with those particular partners, Ms. Geona, what type of funding does the city have, and how much money do they actually have as far as the partners?
So the city has, when we do what we call substantial rehabilitations, we have up to $80,000 that we will invest in a home. Sometimes we invest more based on the approval of our commission. The Common Cause Loan Fund will provide up to $60,000 per house. So between 80 and 60, you have about $140,000. Sometimes that means that if the client is able, if the resident is able and they have funding, they can bring their funding to bear as well. We have instances where clients actually bring their funding in as well. That's not always the case, but sometimes it is. And so that's helpful as well. So again, we pursue organizations that could also help us meet this need in order to make the impact that we'd like to see. So we have rehab, substantial rehabilitation, and then we have what we refer to as our first-time home buyer program. You know about that. Individuals are able to purchase a home on the peninsula or West Ashley, wherever we might buy property or buy a parcel, and we turn it over to a nonprofit or for-profit via what we call a development agreement, and then they build or rehabilitate the home, and then we sell it to a first-time home buyer. We also are working very hard on the rental developments that we funded under the city's $20 million bond. Residents back in 2017 approved a $20 million GEO bond. I'm sure you remember that. We literally got started on those officially in about 2019. And so actually today, Quintin, we're going to celebrate the first rental project that came out of that bond allocation. So we're really excited. That one's West Ashley. So our work is not only on the peninsula of Charleston, but literally across the city of Charleston, James Island, Johns Island, Peninsula, West Ashley. We attempt to facilitate housing activity in all of those areas.
This might be a tough question, but where is the land right now for people who want to participate in the city's first time home buyers program on the peninsula? Sure.
So we are in the midst of, in fact, we have a bid out now. It is due back at the end of this month, the end of August. We plan to build 10 townhomes in the Ardmore Sherwood neighborhood, West Ashley. And so Ms. Peters, who's our housing development officer, will be the individual that helps get folks qualified, if you will, to purchase those houses. They'll be around 1,000 square feet. And what the city did was literally just bid that out so we could have someone come in and build those. We will sell those 10 townhomes. And so those are some that we have that'll be available in another year or so. Then we are also working on a couple of what we call scattered site locations on Peninsula Charleston. Those homes, I imagine we bid those out some time ago. We were actually waiting until the market settled down a little bit before we started building, because as you may know, and I'm sure you've heard, that construction costs are very high right now. The cost for goods and order the materials to build housing is expensive now. And so we bid those out almost a year ago. And so what we did was just kind of sit on those, and we'll probably rebid at the beginning of 2023, the end of this year, so that we can get updated bids. So those would be 2 on the east side and 2 on the west side of Charleston. These are lots that we purchased years ago, but we just simply had not constructed on those houses yet. And then finally, there's an additional 6 units on that will come on the east side. Those will be what we call single family detached homes. Those are expensive. But the city is a part of building those, is providing subsidy so that folks can actually afford it. And I would say, Quintin, so that there's no misconception, when they are looking to purchase a home, they do have to qualify credit wise. They have to have the ability to secure financing from a bank in order to buy a home. We work with nonprofit organizations that provide credit counseling, that take people through first time what we call homebuyer classes, so that people know what to expect.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Now, you talked about those, I guess, those single family, attachments. What's the price tag on that?
So it'll vary with the homes. They're probably coming in right now at $280,000. That is what we call the total development cost. That does not mean that the client will have to secure a mortgage for that. Typically, that down payment assistance or subsidy that we leave in the home allows the client to finance less than what the house costs to build. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if it costs us $250 to build a house, the client may only be able to afford $170. So that delta, or that amount in between, is what we call permanent subsidy, that is left in the home so that subsequent buyers can benefit from it. But I would just say cost of housing, as you can imagine, has gone up as well. We do ask clients to bring, under our first-time homebuyer program, the minimum is $2,500 down payment, or they have to bring that to the table. And then if they don't have any other resources but still need to bring down the first mortgage that they're pursuing, state housing has $5,000 for teachers and firefighters and that sort of thing. So my team will help them look for other resources that might help reduce the amount that they have to finance. I don't want to make it too complicated, but I think you get it. That the goal is bring more money to the table to help it become more affordable.
And with these other houses that you all have, around the city, what are those permanent subsidies right now in those houses?
It varies, Quintin. Literally, it could be as little as $10,000 up to $50,000.
Okay.
Years ago, the city built what we call Peakson's Court on the west side. We built that with Humanities Foundation. I think that was one of the first developments where we put around $50,000-$60,000 in, or left it as permanent subsidy in those houses. And I give you a range because sometimes clients, based on their debt to income ratio and credit and several factors, may be able to afford a little bit more in a mortgage than one client may. So it varies how much we have to invest in a particular house.
Wow. And what's that usual ratio when it comes to the debt to credit?
So usually you want to be at a 30%, 33% ratio. So usually if you're paying more than 30% of your income in rent or mortgage, you are what we refer to as cost burdened.
Okay.
And so when banks are looking at an individual's credit score and they're looking at how much they can afford in a house, oftentimes they don't want an individual to have to pay more than 30% of their income in rent or in a mortgage, because if they are, then it's skewed some and it might become burdensome.
Right. And let me ask you this, Geona, let me reset. How do you define housing affordability in 2022 here in the city of Charleston?
So we base our understanding of of affordability based on those terms I just mentioned. We attempt to make sure that that individual or that family is not paying more than 30% of their income in housing costs, whether they're renting or whether they're buying a home. That is the bar, if you will. Based on HUD guidelines right now, the area median income is around $90,000, and I'll get you the exact figure, Quintin. That is based on a family of four earning 100% of the area median income. And before we're done, I'll get you that exact figure. But that's what we look at as a basis, recognizing that oftentimes residents do not meet that exact income range. They may need a little bit less. And so the idea is, how do we help you meet that need? Everyone can't buy a house immediately, so maybe it's a rental that they will go into. Our comprehensive plan that our planning department had approved back in February of this year indicated that we needed, the City of Charleston needed 16,351 housing units by the end of the decade, in 8 years now, because we're in 2022. And so how do we get there? We have to do it multiple ways. We have to have several strategies. And so when I said we work with Operation Home, Charleston Habitat, private sector developers, we literally need all of those partners in order to help meet the need, because the city in and of itself cannot meet the need by itself.
Okay. How many private sector private sector help do you need right now, Ms. Geona?
So we have two organizations that work under our first-time homebuyer program. And then when we bid projects out, that's when we involve other contractors in our community. So they bring their expertise, if you will, to the table in order to bring that design to fruition, like we'll see hopefully shortly in the next 2 months. Hopefully the construction of those 10 townhomes will start in the Ardmore-Sherwood community. So that's how we engage with private sector and other developers and contractors in our community through our public bid process. And so those are ways that we help to facilitate the availability of housing in our community. And then additionally, what we do when the city has land that's been transferred to it or it has been purchased by us a year, maybe 3 years ago now. Time has passed so quickly. We bought a property on what we call Cunningham Avenue. We are going to put out what we call a request for proposals in another 30 days. And we're going to ask development teams from across the country, really, to submit a bid to us, telling us how much density can they maximize the number of units on that property. And so when the city buys property or acquires property, that is another methodology, if you will, by which we can get housing built, get housing constructed in our community.
And how many bids are you all, putting out right now as far as those particular projects?
So usually it's 1 or 2 a year that we put out, because the process is pretty intense in that it requires, after that bid is released, formulation of a committee to review the bids when they come in, hear presentations by those that have put forth a bid. Then after that is done, decide who's going to secure the bid. That has to then go to city council. Once city council approves it, there's a contract that has to be executed. So it's a pretty involved process. So it's no more than 2 a year. It is also based on how much land we have available. So we do have a few sites right now that we have available. So that's why we have the ability to release a request for proposal. I'd also like to mention on that same street on Cunningham Avenue,
yes, ma'am,
we are building what we are referring to as the Hope Center, which is a center that focuses on providing services to persons who are unsheltered or those that are at risk of becoming unsheltered, so that they are able to transition from homelessness to wholeness is what I like to say. So the center is providing information on rental availability, services with the Department of Mental Health. There are a plethora of services that are being provided. And we work, of course, with a number of organizations like your 180 Places, because they actually provide temporary housing. Our center does not. And so we work with those organizations in order to help facilitate activity for those persons who are in most need.
And let me ask you this, Ms. Geona. When it comes to renting, what's the percentage of people renting in Charleston, and what's the percentage of people who actually own houses?
That is an excellent question that I don't have the answer to. I will just say, if we have what we call now an affordable housing dashboard, Quintin, and it shows that we have available right now about 5,000 affordable housing units available. Now, that doesn't really answer your question specifically, but if you go back to that comprehensive plan, it provides you that breakdown of what's available and then what that need is. Our dashboard will show you, again, that 5,000 plus units that are currently considered affordable, and then what we have in process. And when I say in process, those various developments or projects that we, along with various partners, are building or constructing in order to provide that housing.
And let me ask you this, Geona. What type of housing would be beneficial for the city of Charleston in the future? Healthy housing, affordable housing, or stable housing?
Say that first name again.
Yes, ma'am. What type of housing would be beneficial for the city in the future? Healthy housing, affordable housing, or stable housing?
All of the above. All of the above is critical. In fact, when we build, we try to build to Energy Star, different standards of affordability, so that the houses that we build will be sustained for the long term. Our affordability covenants, the maximum that we have right now is 90 years. Wow. We work with an organization where we also provide funding to them, the Charleston Redevelopment Corporation. They have the Palmetto Community Land Trust. So when they buy houses in either rental or for sale, again, those are put into a land trust such that that house is affordable for perpetuity. Because when you speak about sustainability, Quintin, you talk about the money that we invest, the money that is essential in order to get these homes constructed. We would not be a good steward of those funds and that construction if we weren't ensuring that that property was available for the long term. And so part of our goal is to make sure that we are preserving housing for the long term.
And let me ask you this too. What is the percentage of households right now in the city of Charleston?
The percentage of households?
Yes, ma'am.
You mean what our population is?
Oh, that's true. Yes, ma'am.
I want to think of slightly over 140,000 in the city of Charleston proper. But don't put that in ink, because
right.
that number may be off as far as population statistics, but that is around where we are.
And what percentage of homes have actually been sold in the city of Charleston over the past year or so?
Over the last year, we've probably done 10 to 12, because we even count, for instance, at the Longborough development, we have several of those units have been resold. And I will just say those are a set of properties that once the owner puts them up for sale, they are literally gone in 30 days is what we've seen. We have seen those sell very quickly.
Wow. And let me ask you this. When do you expect the city's land use code to be actually updated?
So I'm not a planner,
okay.
Although I work with the planning department, but
Right.
I know, simply because I work with them closely, that they're in the midst of starting that process right now. They're looking at an update to the zoning codes in the city of Charleston. Robert Summerfield is the planning director, but they have had that presented to the mayor and council with regard to that process.
And this might be another difficult question, Ms. Geona, but is the city currently going to remove barriers to allow densities via that land use code?
Quintin, I hope so, simply because if we have the ability to increase density, that means we can build more housing, which means we can help meet that need faster. But again, I would certainly defer to Robert Summerfield or Christopher Morgan. But certainly the goal is where we can allow for additional density, we would certainly want to have that.
And what approach do you hope the city will take to create a new dedicated revenue streaming for housing?
What a wonderful question. So I would love to see another bond allocation to create housing. That has been really pivotal for us. The $20 million bond that voters approved in 2017 has leveraged over $100 million. And that will produce around 529 units of rental housing. So bonds are great avenues and sources for affordable housing. The city also allocates approximately $300,000 a year for affordable housing from what is referred to as franchise fees.
Okay.
But again, as the cost of housing goes up, the need of housing, the cost for land goes up. We have to be very strategic about looking at additional sources of funds by which to allow housing or to enable housing to happen.
And how much has those particular fees you just mentioned went up in the past 2 years?
So we've seen approximately probably a 20% increase in the cost of housing. And if I stared at it really hard, it might be more than that. Okay. Because right now we're building at $300 a square foot, which is very expensive for a house. And that is why we're having to subsidize more heavily than we typically would because of those construction costs. So hopefully by the time, we've seen some decreases, if you will, in the cost of certain materials already. Hopefully as the summer comes to a close, we'll see a leveling out, if you will, of the cost to build housing in our community.
And let me ask you this too, Ms. Geona. How is the city currently recalibrating existing initiatives or incentives, I should say?
So recalibrating incentive. I think what we're doing, again, is trying to be strategic about what we offer. We are also looking at other opportunities where we can partner and collaborate, because that is also the key to success. One of the things that has been really important to building rental affordable housing in our community, Quint, are the low-income housing tax credits. So the city has been actively engaged in that process and attempting to share with state housing and those legislators that have a voice in that particular funding source, making sure they're aware of how important that funding source is to the Charleston community and to the state of South Carolina. State housing tax credits and the federal tax credit has enabled more than 50,000 units of rental housing in our state. So with that understanding, we recognize how important that funding stream is. And so we want to make sure that that funding stream is protected and that it is enhanced. And so making sure that our state partners recognize that is really important to the process. So that's one of those that we continue on an annual basis to recalibrate, to send letters to state housing, send letters to our state legislators to say, we really need this source of funds in our community to make housing happen.
And Ms. Geona, I was just thinking about this too, but how does the City of Charleston explore a rental registry or licensing program?
So actually, I know that the planning department and our livability department are looking at that as a process right now. Oh. So I would say on the next conversation with Quintin, you grab those guys and have that conversation with them. It was presented to the city committee of city council maybe a month ago. They were very receptive to the idea. Naturally, some questions and concerns arose, but they are looking at that as an avenue right now as we speak.
And this might be maybe a livability question here, Ms. Geona, but would the city be in favor of exploring revisions to the city's occupancy policy?
When you say occupancy tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah, the current the revisions to the city's current occupancy policy, and as far as housing and rentals and whatnot.
So we are looking at various programs even now as we think about how people live and the affordability of units. For those especially that are unsheltered, how can we match them with like-minded folks to have them share a rental unit, if you will. And so others have done it in other communities, and so we are evaluating that as a housing option, especially for those that are unsheltered, that are on limited incomes, and where that particular strategy can be applied to a housing development. We are researching that as we speak.
And I know I have less than a minute here, but let me ask you this. Would the city support resident organizing in manufactured home communities?
So you mean like mobile homes?
Yes, ma'am, exactly right.
So I'm not a big supporter of mobile homes, and that is because I think you could build a traditional home even if it's smaller, just because of the nature of it and the sustainability of it with the various storms that we encounter more intensely now in our community. I think you can build other homes that provide for that sustainability to ensure that that resident is not faced with being without a home totally. And I know those homes have been important to our community for years and still are. And I don't discourage people from going that route if that's their choice. I prefer that we build homes, even if they're not manufactured, and I'm trying to think of the term, but nevertheless, there are homes that we have come to understand can be built with greater sustainability, with greater strength, especially within our southeastern communities, that will be able to withstand the storms that we encounter now in our community.
Geona Shaw Johnson with the City of Charleston, thank you for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Oh, you're welcome anytime.